A question. Where are you from? For most of us, this is something that's not very complicated. We grew up maybe in a small community, maybe we've moved a couple of times, and it's a question that we have to answer a lot when meeting new people. I think of when I first came to Andrews University. It's a question you get asked all the time. However, it's not something that's simple for someone like me, who doesn't really have somewhere where they grew up. And this being a very diverse campus, I know there are many more. A term that's come into recent use about the last 20, 30 years is the term third culture kid. And so the question is, what is a third culture kid? A third culture kid is someone who's grown up in a culture that is different from that of their parents. Most often we find this in missionary kids or kids of diplomats who've grown up across in a different country. However, the United States is a very, very diverse country already, and so this can happen even within one country. The basics of what happens is that the parents have one culture, what they're used to, what they kind of grew up in. You have the culture in which they're living, and then you have the third culture, which is where the term comes from. The one the child creates for himself as an amalgamation of both his parents and his location. However, this culture is not really that of the parents, and it's not really that of the host. It is something entirely different. Move forward. A little bit about me. I was born in Berrien Springs, Michigan, right here. Doesn't really say very much about me, but it's a fact. I was born here back 21 years ago, and I don't really remember much about Berrien Springs. We moved when I was 4 years old. My parents moved to Argentina, where I learned Spanish because we hadn't really spoken it much at home. We were there for 4 years my parents were working at the university. I grew up, I made friends, spoke Spanish like an Argentine, still kind of do. And soon afterwards, about 4 years later, we were there for just under 4 years, we got a call to move to the Philippines, which was kind of a long ways away. I was not particularly happy with my parents. I'm like, why are we moving? I have friends here, I don't want to leave. I really, really don't want to leave. Why do we have to move? However, unbeknownst to me at the time, and I came to understand this later, is that they were basically losing their jobs because the Argentine government was no longer willing to give the school accreditation if they were to stay. In any case, circumstances beyond our control. And so we moved to the Philippines. When we first arrived in the Philippines, I was 8 years old and kind of adjusting to a new place, entirely new school system. And the one thing that I remember very, very vividly is that we had rice very often. And this bothered me. I'm like, Mom, why do we have to have rice? I've had rice every day this week. And I mean, to be fair, we only had rice once a day. Just a single time a day. It was just for lunch. But I was really, really frustrated by this. And Mom was like, no, we live here. We need to eat like this. And I just didn't get it. And I'll never forget, about 2 years later, we were on vacation in the US. We'd been here for about a week and a half or two. And I turned to Mom, I'm like, Mom, where's the rice? Yeah, I need my rice. And I think back and I'm like, this is exactly what happens with a third culture kid, is you absorb little bits and pieces. In the interest of full disclosure, there is not just one kind of third culture kid. Because we all have our own different, unique experiences, different countries in which we've lived. It's all different. However, there's a lot of things we have in common. And I'm just going to go over a bunch of those things. This is a partial list and not intended to be complete. Some of the things that we have, as far as developmental skills, we're used to managing things on our own. We're used to the fact that we don't necessarily have the same community we grew up in. Because we're not always with our friends, we have to communicate with them. I have friends I haven't seen in over a decade. I have no idea when I'm going to see them again. Thank the internet. It's wonderful. But at the same time, switching school systems, switching languages for me, it's a challenge. It's something that we have to deal with. Society is not the same in one place or another. This changes. We're used to saying goodbye, which is both kind of a good thing, you might say, but it doesn't make for a very pleasant childhood sometimes. Very much a victim to fate in the sense of we don't have control. Growing up as a kid, I didn't have a choice of when we were leaving Argentina. That was made for me. And it's the way it was. Because we've grown up around the world, like I say, I love rice. I don't know how I would live without it, but myself 15 years ago when living in Argentina would not have believed me. It happens. We absorb different values, different traditions from all the places we live, from all the places we visited. We gather in. However, one major disadvantage of that is I remember when I came back to the US, I'm not at home here. I hold an American passport. I'm not at home in this country. And it's really weird thinking about that because this should be my home, right? It doesn't feel that way. There's too many things that I haven't grown up around that I'm not familiar with, that I'm not comfortable around. I am very much off balance here in what's supposed to be my home. Also used to moving. One advantage that third culture kids have in society is that we are flexible. We're used to dealing with problems as they come up in ways that we really didn't anticipate. We're used to change, and so it doesn't scare us as much as maybe it should. We've done it so many times that once more really isn't really a big deal. And so some strong points there. We can deal with situations on the fly. However, as is up there, we're very rootless. I cannot say I am from one place. It doesn't make sense. It's not an answer I can give. Which means that I don't have kind of a core of where I'm from. I don't feel like home is a place, like I can ever settle down and not move. I realize this is not shared by all third culture kids, but it's something that is common in us. As far as worldview goes, again, like I said, we've picked up ideas from all the different places we've lived. We pick up little bits and pieces of values that we appreciate. And it's a unique collection. It's unique to even each TCK, each third culture kid. We're observers. When you visit a new place, someplace you're not familiar with, the first thing you do is you step back and you say, okay, what is going on? What are the locals doing? And so we observe and we say, okay, this is what's going on. You take a step back, and then after a while, we involve ourselves. We're used to misunderstandings. We're used to miscommunication because it happens all the time. You ever try and visit somewhere with a different language? You know you're not going to understand everything they say, and so you learn to communicate. I want, that. I want 3 of them. You know they're not understanding what you're saying, and you hope you have the right amount of money when you're done. You take it as it goes. To me, one of the most important things and interesting things to me is in dealing with relationships, friendships. TCKs, we recognize that fate is not, as in we don't necessarily know where we're going to be. We're not able to take tomorrow for granted. We don't know when we're going to have to move again. And so to us now, the here and now is extremely important because tomorrow is not promised. And so we don't really do small talk. Small talk seems like a waste of time. And so when we go to start relationships in a new place, we just dive right into what's important, the core of who we are, who we're going to be, who we want to be. And same with the other person, who are you really? Not what shows do you watch, what music do you listen to. That's kind of interesting information, but not really at the core of who you are. Some of the disadvantages that come with this is because we're used to leaving, what's written up here as a quick release, is that often when we leave, we break all contact. Because we've done it so many times, it hurts to drag it out. One of the things I noticed when I came here to Andrews University is that we have a very diverse campus. And for me, I was still trying to figure out my identity. I was 17 when I came here as a freshman, still trying to figure out who I am. And orientation week, you meet people, and the first thing you get asked is, what's your name? Simple, I know that. My name is Erik Vyhmeister. Cool. What's your major? I'm a music major. I'm doing music education. No longer, but... And then the question comes, where are you from? And I'm just thinking, okay, where am I from? I went to high school in Kenya. My parents currently live in the Philippines. I have 2 passports. What do I say? And so I say, well, it's complicated. Then the inevitable question follows. Well, where were you born? And I'm thinking, that really doesn't answer the question. I mean, I know what you're looking for, but that's not going to help you figure out who I am. And so it's complicated, and so I launch into this short, maybe 30-second spiel of places I've lived. And the thing I noticed with that is that immediately after I'm done, the conversation is over. Because I've come to realize this is people who haven't traveled have a hard time relating to me as a TCK. And it's one of the biggest challenges we have as third culture kids, is that it's often very difficult to relate to our story. We've traveled more than a lot of people. It's just our life story. It's not anything we consider special. To us, this is normal. This is my life. And yet, that's a huge part of us that we can't share. And that's a challenge. Honestly, it can be very, very, very isolating, very separating from the people we interact with. Oftentimes, we compartmentalize and say, you know, for here, I'm going to be like this. I'm going to act like an American while I am here, because it's a lot simpler to show myself as an American and to have people understand me as an American than to try and explain my life. Because it's complicated, and it's difficult to explain and difficult to understand. It's not something that can be done simply. And so we wear masks. And that can be challenging, especially when you're trying to figure out who you are. Remember, one thing I did a couple years ago is I was trying to figure out, you know, going through this process of, you know, where am I from? I said, I'm going to take a look at the map and say, I know where I've been. I'm going to map out where I've been and average my physical location on the globe. And so I did, you know, a couple years in the US, I'm in Argentina, spent a year in Egypt, and so I was averaging this out, and I'm like, that's in Nigeria. I've never been to Nigeria. Okay, it's in the middle of a game park. Probably some animals, lovely. And that really didn't help. It really, really didn't help at all. But it's one of those things we try and do is we try and nail down who we are. And as a fact of the matter is, it's complicated. It's not simple, and it's not something that can be explained very well, if at all. It's not something that can be verbalized, but it's something that's a core part of all of us. Say, in conversation with other TCKs, we understand each other because we know that it's not about where we're from, but about our experience. The beauty of being a TCK is that you are not tied to a location. You're not tied to, this is where I'm from, and so I've inherited that. We have the ability to self-define. We have the ability to choose to define ourselves, and we can change that if we need to, if the situation demands it. And that is a great asset that we have. 20 years down the road, you can reinvent yourself if you so wish. Andrews is a beautifully diverse campus, and I know there are a lot of TCKs in this room. If you are not one, you probably have a number of them as friends. There's a large part of them that you may not be able to understand. That's okay. But the one thing is that TCKs do not fit very many stereotypes, if at all. And it's a strength, honestly. I believe it to be a strength. The one, just in closing here, we break stereotypes. We don't fit. Like I say, I look like an American. I'm not. My passport says I am. That's not who I am. As you get to know TCKs, you notice that, but you don't see that at first. There's a lot more depth than there seems. Yes. Again, we break stereotypes all the time, and it's wonderful to be unique and to have these wonderful assets that we have in communicating with people. Thank you for your time.